welcome to the 7th CoinGecko virtual meetup. And just to give you some context, so CoinGecko is the world's largest crypto data aggregator, where we pride ourselves as being an independent and neutral data provider in the crypto space. I'm TM Lee, the co-founder at CoinGecko, and I'll be moderating this session. For those of you who are not familiar with non-fungible tokens, also widely known as NFT, NFT basically refers to tokens with some sort of a unique characteristic. Think of it as collectible cards or airline tickets where each of them are different from each other. Contrast that with fungible tokens like Bitcoin or Ether, where all of them are sort of the same and interchangeable. In recent times, we have seen an explosive growth in the area of art pieces, where art pieces are getting distributed in the form of NFTs. And joining us today are three great panelists who will be here discussing about how NFT plays a role in the crypto art scene, and are we seeing a new renaissance in the art space. So with us here is Devin Finzer, who is the co-founder and CEO of OpenSea. OpenSea is the world's largest marketplace of crypto collectibles. You can think of it sort of like an eBay for NFTs. And being a marketplace, I'm sure Devin has seen all the NFTs from the beginning of time all the way to what we see right now. Next up, we have Crain, who is the co-founder and CEO of SuperRare. SuperRare is a curated gallery and marketplace for artists to submit their artwork, and collectors can then bid, buy, and collect these artworks. And most of the artwork there are super high profile. Finally, we have Marguerite, who also known as Coin Artist, who is the co-founder and CEO at Blockade Games. And Blockade Games is a blockchain game development studio with their flagship game called Neon District. And she also has a social token called Coin, where she's currently experimenting with some element of staking for crypto arts. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's kick off with the first topic, right? So going back 3 to 4 years ago, some of the earliest crypto art projects were things like CryptoPunks or Rare Pepe, and those are some interesting experiments that sort of like set the tone for the industry, in my view. Obviously, a lot has changed in the last 3 to 4 years, and all of you were in the NFT space like since the really, really early days. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the current state of crypto art and NFT, and have we made much progress, or has it been all hype? So maybe we can start off with Devin, and then we can go on with John and Marguerite and so on. Yep.
Sure. Well, I would say at a high level, definitely, I think the space has made a lot of progress. And I think one thing that's been interesting to see is that a lot of the projects that started really early on have actually captured value just by like being really early. So CryptoPunks is a great example of one of those where, you know, I think back in 2017 was when they were initially released to people for free. And now there's a market for CryptoPunks, you know, selling much higher than that, you know, around 1 or 2 ETH for the lowest tier punk. So what's been interesting is because the space has now been around for almost 3 years, I guess you could say, there are these projects that are kind of emerging as digital antiques. So that's one really fun thing to see, is that given enough time, you start to develop like these assets that have actually been around for a while, which is one of the kind of unique characteristics of art, is like when was it made, right? But in general, I would say the things that have happened are, one, kind of the infrastructure, sort of the consumer facing infrastructure has improved while we're still on the Ethereum blockchain. And, you know, Ethereum has been relatively steady over time. The wallet support, the ability to view your NFTs in a variety of different places has all improved. And just the companies that are building art platforms have, you know, added feature after feature that have been really awesome for people who want to both collect and create art. So, you know, back, if you look at kind of when CryptoPunks launched, it was really this isolated experience where you could go and, you know, you could claim your CryptoPunk, and then on the CryptoPunk website, you could you know, put it for sale. And that was pretty much it, right? It was just sort of, it felt like one website where you would connect your wallet. Now it's like, you know, tens of different art websites, tens of different places where you can display your art, right? There's galleries, maybe we'll probably talk about these later in the discussion, but galleries like CryptoVoxels and Decentraland, where you can go and view this art inside of a virtual world. You know, there's tons of different marketplaces and tons of different ways to sell your art, auctioning, Dutch auctions, bundles, all of these things. So I would say it's, in my opinion, it's just kind of like a general maturity of the space that has happened over the last couple of years as you know, these teams keep on building out their platforms.
Yeah, so I think that the maturity sort of gives validation and also builds the infrastructure to help developers and artists to come in to build on top of this space, which is definitely a good thing. In 3 years, I think a lot has happened as well. So moving on, like John, do you have anything to add in your perspective of running a curated gallery as well on this part?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I definitely second everything Devin said. I think like a lot of the infrastructure has been built. It's easier to get involved in the space. Obviously, the community is a lot bigger, and around like whether I think it's sustainable growth or just hype. I think there's probably a lot of both involved. I think there's a lot of hype, but at the same time, I think like the digital art market was kind of poised to be contemporary art, sort of having those certificates of authenticity and having the NFT to be able to prove that you have kind of a genuine original piece of art was sort of the missing component, right? We have like the art technology is getting a lot better, displays are getting a lot cheaper. So I think there was, we were already seeing sort of much more digital art and interacting with more art in our daily lives. And so kind of like the NFT is sort of just a catalyst. It was kind of like waiting to grow. And so I think combining those two elements, we're kind of seeing the results of that. And, I think it's still kind of just,
I think I agree on that. Like DeviantArt, which is one of the biggest art gallery for the longest time, didn't have the NFT element to it to capture the value of uniqueness. So certainly NFT may be the missing piece to bring out the value of all these art pieces, as you mentioned. So moving on, like Marguerite, you've been involved in the NFT space, I think much earlier than that as well, and also building a blockchain games which relates to NFT and your latest project as well. Do you have anything to share in this part based on your experience in the last 3 to 4 years or more than that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started, like in 2014, NFTs were not a thing, right? And but the artists were always trying to figure out how to be creative with the tech. It's actually a pretty cool story. I met Josie Bellini at a expo in Chicago in 2017, and she was just making traditional prints, physical prints. And as I onboarded her, and actually I think I introduced her to the SuperRare community and these other groups that were just getting off the ground, she took that on her own. And as I watched from the sidelines, basically, because I was doing other things, like her exploring the idea of augmented reality with her artwork, like really leaning into this digital factor. And now we've seen that more across the space too, like artists getting really creative about what is this new medium. And I remember talking to John, I think 2018, about we were working on a project called Plaza Bears. And we had this whole crew of artists that were just starting to experiment. And as a game company, I'm thinking, oh gosh, maybe we could team up and have access to all of this content creation in a cheaper fashion. So we were using a lot of the artists that came forward doing like algorithmic generated art skins for the bears and uploading them because we wanted to have like thousands of different varieties of bears. So we were working with some of these artists, and that was a really neat experience. So as we continue on from Neon District, it's of our mind to include a pipeline in which we can allow artists to basically, through these different platforms, like let's say OpenSea, like how can Blockade make it easy for artists to upload their basically NFTs so that Neon District can show them mapped to a 2D character in a way that they get composed and like they can trade them as an asset. So like that's maybe a couple of years out, but definitely thinking about this magical content creation community that has emerged, and as application developers, how can we leverage them? Because it's, I guess in the current state where I see where we are with the art is we're at the place where artists are making these NFTs, but we're just now, how do we give these NFTs additional utility, which is kind of the magical piece of having these digital assets.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where when you say Renaissance, that's where I think this Renaissance really explodes.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good point, and it goes back to what we're going to discuss next. Like how will you define the success of a crypto art space, right? Like, some people are defining success because someone is able to flip an art piece for X amount of money, but I think that is too naive to think of it that way. And is the end goal for crypto art is something that there should be a utility to the art piece itself rather than just the aesthetic look of it, or there's something more than that? Because right now, there are people who are saying that, yeah, I could just copy and paste the images that I see on the internet, and I don't need to buy an NFT. Should the NFT itself provide some sort of a utility in order to give value to it, or value can just be derived from the image itself to build on top of what you just described?
Yeah, the copy and paste people always love to pop up. And I think, to those people, I always ask, like, well, have you ever, collected anything? I often think they don't really understand why people collect things. You don't spend $100 million for an Andy Warhol because you want to be able to look at the Andy Warhol on your wall. You could have an incredible reproduction made for significantly less. So, like, what are you actually spending $100 million on? Because it's not the ability to enjoy visually an Andy Warhol. And so I think, like, a big part of what you're buying is sort of a piece of history. You're now going to be recorded in the provenance. And so I don't necessarily think that, a lot of people talk about this, like, the NFTs need to do something. And I totally disagree. I think if you look at collectibles, like, what does, a collection of baseball cards do? Well, it doesn't do anything. And so, yeah, I think people are maybe misunderstanding why collecting is fun. And I think a big part of it is kind of the social experience.
Right. So basically the historical story behind the NFT itself will probably give it some value in the eyes of a collector, right?
Yeah, and you're becoming part of the history, right? Everyone is going to know that you were, a collector that participated in that provenance. And the only way you can do that is with the NFT. So you can download, JPEGs all day long. Mm-hmm. But I think ultimately that probably just increases the value of an NFT instead of, diminishing it.
Got it. And Marguerite, like earlier you mentioned about possibility of a game giving utility to the art piece. Like, is that the thesis that you're buying into, that eventually art should have a use case instead on top of the historical value behind it as well?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to touch real quick on the fact that I was in the same conversation recently about how are these NFTs valuably copy-paste conversation. But in addition, this particular argument was about taking, because I've played around with taking selfies and posting them, and how is a selfie valuable as an NFT? Because it's not, the argument was, it's not even the original picture you took, which is on your phone. That's the valuable thing. This is just like a copy of that. And it's not, you can't sell it as an original. But in reality, when you, even like in fine art with photography, when you take something, you have the digital negative. From that digital negative, you're making prints, right? Like, you could argue that the original is this negative, but no one wants to buy the negative. They're buying the prints from you. And you as the creator gets to say, this is the one-of-one print I'm making. I mean, that's your right as an artist to say that. So anyways, and then going back to this idea of utility and the applications. Yeah, so I actually teamed up really early on with somebody named Diego Rodriguez. He's the lead artist for Neon District. He was he was one of the first artists for Bitcoin Magazine. I loved his work, started noticing it in 2013, 2014. We officially became a duo in 2015, 16 and made different works together. He was the natural fit for me for our game company as being the lead artist. And what I wanted to do with Neon District was really showcase it as a platform for art to have this sort of utility. So if you think of video games like Final Fantasy or other heavy art games that were very inspiring, I saw this as an opportunity to basically bring these artistic assets to life and see that additional value. So if you look at any of Neon District stuff, you'll notice that it looks like 2D paintings. I mean, it is 2D paintings. So I guess I really do believe that as creators and developers, we're going to be able to leverage these NFTs, all kinds of people's NFTs in creative ways. Depends on copyright laws and licensing. As we start to explore things like music, multimedia, and like ownership of these pieces. Currently, I have to have conversations with everybody as, do you want me to support the image files in our gaming platform? But eventually we can figure out some sort of licensing agreement. So as a game company, maybe I could be buying these things or just tapping into APIs and presenting them so people can buy them, almost like a through marketplace where the game could double as you buy something that shows up during a level in a special, like, let's say on a billboard. You could just click it could go to your wallet sort of thing, and you can use the money that's already in your wallet to buy it as an experience. But yeah, we have to explore the license. I think we're at the place now where the platforms are emerging, but we actually really do need to figure out the licensing conversation.
Yeah, and I think the experimentation shouldn't be too far. Like I think Audius, which is a distributed music platform, is launching soon, and then I think there's a lot of synergy with the space in terms of IPs and creative works, and the more experimentation is, the clearer it is things get in this portion. So Devin, like, do you have any input for this kind of argument of a copy paste thing? Like, I'm sure you have your own opinion on this itself, being running an NFT marketplace, that all the contents out there are digital. But what would be your take for this?
I would generally agree with what's been said. I think John had a good way of framing it in that you're not buying the piece just for the display, right? If you wanted to display something, you could pretty simply get a replica of it. And you're also not buying it for the raw resources, right? Like, you're not the inputs to creating the Mona Lisa, for example, aren't costing hundreds of millions of dollars. And in the same way that you can, I think the copy paste analogy works also for physical art. You can pretty easily create replicas of things. It's just a little bit easier in the digital world, but that doesn't mean that there's no notion of basically what blockchain has introduced is this sort of idea of the original and an almost sort of physical analog to, or a digital analog to, what we have in the physical world, which I think is really exciting. And I guess regarding sort of utility for art versus just provenance, I think there will just be a wide variety of things, right? I think, in the gaming community, we've already seen this idea of these ultra rare assets that almost act as kind of art within a game. And those do sometimes have utility and of course there's certainly collectibles in art that are just going off of basically the provenance of the piece. So I think the magical thing about NFTs is that they're so generic that you can really build all sorts of types of applications. Just as a couple examples, we have people who are selling advertising space as NFTs on OpenSea, right? So you can buy an NFT and then use that to display an ad on a website. We have, of course, people who have built event tickets as NFTs and allow those to be traded. Domain names, game items, all of these things are starting to happen. So I think, all of the above in terms of utility, useful things versus just pure collectibles.
Yeah, and going from the discussion about provenance and also being part of the history of the NFT, and we're starting to see a new concept here where people stake some tokens in order to get some coupons or vouchers to redeem like art pieces. I think we have seen that started off by the meme project, where you can stake meme tokens and you get pineapples to redeem art pieces. And I think Marguerite also has a new project called Coin Artist that allows some sort of a staking mechanism as well. So this is sort of like a proof of work way of generating art pieces rather than the auction way of acquiring art pieces from someone else via an auction, right? So there's something that we have not seen in the traditional sense. So do people like end up purchasing all these art pieces in the secondary market because of speculation, or because there are some history that they want to be part of, or some provenance, because it's not a very antique art pieces that people are paying crazy price for, right? These are art pieces that were just staked and acquired within a short period of time. Do you have any take on this new way of getting art pieces out into the market via staking? Perhaps Marguerite, you want to start because you sort of have a project that relates very closely to this. Yeah.
Yeah. So with meme it's really cool to see people so excited to stake and get the art pieces. But I've noticed I noticed a little bit of a problem actually in just a conversation with a friend I was having. They were really excited to get this new NFT that just came out, but then they realized that they weren't one of the first people to join the pool to stake. And so they were going to be all mined by the first people that joined. So they weren't going to get one, and they were really bummed out. As a game developer, I'm thinking, oh, we need an additional game mechanic there so that, it's not just the first one that gets to stake gets the NFT. So that's where, like, for example, what we're rolling out is the ability to stake for shards for distributed ownership of the NFT instead. And that way, as you're staking, you're accumulating lots of different fractional ownership pieces of these different NFTs. So you could stake for a period of time. You don't have to stake. You won't own the whole art piece. So I'm curious to see if people will be interested in that, or if really it is just they want to own the entire NFT as a collectible piece. Because we can, I'm thinking about rolling that out too. I'm just curious about what is, when you're saying the proof of work or the function, and as we're bridging DeFi with NFTs, what are the mechanics that people really get excited about? Is it the speculative market? Because if it is, then shards and fractional ownership should be pretty exciting too.
Yeah, I think shards has been recently taken off, and because of the explosive in the NFT market and people want to own a fraction of Gen Zero CryptoKitties or Mystic Xyz, we're seeing a lot of that as well. And I think it's definitely a cool experiment to see if people are willing to own a fraction of all these NFTs. Because, I mean, for NFT art, which is not income generated, what would a shard actually mean? Would it be being able to obtain a portion of a rental or something like that, so something that generates income? Or is it that the NFT itself gets sold and then you're able to sell your shards for a higher price? Right? So it really depends on why someone wants to own a shard as well. That remains still to be seen in time to come. John or Devin, do you have any input on staking for art?
Yeah, I think it's super cool. It's it's so fun to see all the experimentation. I think also Meme has the cool, Genesis story where it just started in the Telegram group or Discord and kind of grew into this, pretty high profile project. And I think, it's also sort of plays in the idea of art as an experience, right? You could sort of imagine the whole thing is kind of an art project, and obtaining NFTs is just one component. So the staking is participating and interacting with this sort of real-time art project. And then, so yeah, I think it's super cool. I think we're going to see a lot more. I imagine staking for shards of NFTs is going to be super fun as well. I think, if you look at platforms like Rally Road or Masterworks, where they're fractionalizing physical collectibles and selling, shards or just fractions of them, these are getting super popular and are also just really fun. I think it's also part of I love going on Rally Road and kind of reading about the different offerings they have. Even if I'm not even going to buy it, it's fun to read through. And then if you can participate even further if you'd like to.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think there's this interesting sort of cultural component to projects like Meme and also kind of what we've seen, because the crypto art space is predominantly people who are deep into crypto, a lot of it tends to be very crypto themed. So for example, when the Uniswap token launched, there was a piece that I believe Diego Rodriguez created around that launch. It was some kind of unicorn piece, very Uniswap themed, right? And I think Hayden ended up purchasing that for some number of ETH plus some Unisocks. He threw in some Uniswap sock tokens, and so that was kind of this interesting moment. And there have been a lot of moments like that where there's sort of this part of crypto history that gets memorialized on the blockchain. And I could see Meme sort of has a lot of those elements to it. In addition to the staking, all of the Meme cards are sort of these famous or semi-famous crypto people, right? And if you look 5 years down the road, those are sort of the Satoshis of our time, right? And having a Meme authenticated trading card for one of those folks, as long as like the supply of meme is, or the supply of the meme NFTs doesn't get out of control, could actually be very analogous to owning a CryptoPunk in 2017, right? With a much larger audience that cares about this type of stuff. So I think, again, maybe this is kind of alluding to what I mentioned in the beginning, but I think CryptoPunks is this really interesting example, right? Like that's a lot of people, made the same claims that these things were kind of silly and weren't going to be valuable. But then, you wait 3 years and you start to look back at these things and realize that they do capture cultural moments. And that's not true for all of the crypto art that's being produced. Some of it is, kind of these things where someone just uploads something and, puts it out there. I'm not necessarily claiming that all of these things will be valuable, but I do think that there's a huge opportunity for projects like Meme, where there's, sort of this provable scarcity that goes into it with the staking mechanic, as well as for projects like SuperRare, where they've been super curatorial about who they let into their smart contracts to, have that sort of longevity. And certainly there are people who are buying it as a speculative vehicle right now, but I think over time we'll start to look back and, sort of see it as something that's a real part of crypto culture.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. And so moving on to another like topic here regarding the challenges that you guys face. And I know like Devin, you run a marketplace. John, you run a gallery. Marguerite, you run a game company, and also you have the Coin Artist project as well. What would you say would be your biggest challenge in that you are facing? And Devin, I think you mentioned earlier about the people who are involved are mainly crypto natives. Like, is the biggest challenge like getting adoption from the artist side or collectors to be outside of the crypto space, or is it a technical challenge that you guys are facing in terms of scalability or barrier of entry? I'm sure each of you will have different challenges, but curious to hear what are the things that keep you guys awake every night with regards to NFT and art. Maybe Devin, you want to start first on the challenges that you face?
Sure. So I would say the biggest thing for us, since we're not just an art marketplace, we also have other sorts of assets, is that I would say that the design space does become limited by the sort of technical constraints of the network, right? So especially now it's not quite as acute, but when we had gas prices that were like in the 300 to 500 Gwei range, we would just see that these lower value assets were really hard to, trade around and for people to purchase, right? Because they had to pay this gas premium on top of it. So I would say like one of the big challenges for the space is if we want to expand beyond just sort of these relatively high barrier to entry assets where, not only are you buying the asset for a high amount, but you're also paying a premium on top of it, that we do need like some sort of scalability solution that allows for higher throughput sorts of experiences. Like, if you're operating a game, for example, it's really just not feasible to have people pay high gas prices and have to wait around to receive their assets. So that's definitely something that we're sort of focusing on for as a long-term investment, is expanding to other chains that balance those trade-offs a little bit differently than Ethereum, and also exploring the space of scaling solutions on top of Ethereum. So I would point to that as kind of like one of the bigger challenges for the whole NFT space.
Like in that sense, like, do you see NFT assets also being issued on the other chains? I mean, this is not like layer 2, but more on the other up and coming chains that these projects are promoting. Do you see projects moving over, or there will be a issuance on both sides of the chain? How would the multi-chain environment kind of look like based on what you just described?
Right. So I think we're seeing all of the above, sort of in the early stages, right? So certainly, even with projects like EOS and Tron way back in the day, there were definitely people who, said that they preferred those types of environments, even if they're relatively centralized over Ethereum. And those were probably not, that probably wasn't a super wise decision at the time. Maybe for some projects it was, but now, there's a much more mature ecosystem of both like layer 2 solutions, right, where it's a side chain and you sort of have the interoperability within the side chain, but you can bring it back into Ethereum and then you can move it back. So examples of those types of projects are like XDAI and Matic, and maybe a few others. And then of course there's these like brand new chains, right? So examples of those being Wax and Flow, and then a little further out like Solana and Near Protocol. And we're seeing early development on all of those. Obviously with Flow from Dapper Labs, they're building their own flagship project, NBA Top Shot, which is now in, I think, public beta. And that's really exciting. And then with projects like Solana and Near, we're seeing like teams kind of in the early stages of building on them. So I think Mintbase recently started developing on Near. And then certainly we're seeing a lot of excitement. I think Neon District or Coin Artist can speak to some of this, but Matic there's NFTs that are like transacting on a day-to-day basis on Matic. So this stuff has come a long way. It's just not quite, it doesn't have quite the ecosystem that has been built up on Ethereum. And it certainly doesn't have the like balance sheet of Ethereum where, there's all these people who hold tokens on Ethereum. Mm-hmm. But I'm seeing like very promising signs that other chains are going to be home to like flourishing ecosystems. But it is an open question around how all of these things kind of like interact with each other.
Yeah, that actually make a lot of sense. John, like, what's the challenges that you face running a gallery, or what you see on your side of things?
Yeah, sure. So definitely, feel the pain of the scaling solutions. So happy that gas prices have come down a bit. I think one thing that's interesting is, we're thinking about like, how can we kind of expand curation, right? Like we've, done a lot of, we've sort of been like the main curators. And so like, how can we evolve SuperRare to include more curation, like more diverse types of curation? So it's not just us. So that's kind of like just a design challenge. We're thinking about how to have more interesting curation. And then, I think also like really good display solutions. I think, it's super fun to build a VR gallery to show off your collection. But at the same time, it's like, if you're just having your friends over, it's like harder to get everybody into VR to look around. And so there's definitely a lot of interest to have a good solution for just like, putting your art on your wall and kind of having it there to enjoy yourself or, tell your friends about. And so I think there's a lot of work to do there. I think eventually we'll have a pretty sort of, magical user experience that feels pretty seamless, but there's lots of work to do there.
And I suppose that the solution won't be that obvious, right? Because I think most people are imagining a museum, like going to CryptoVoxel or Decentraland, where you can view an art piece. But again, not everybody has a VR gear to really enjoy it like firsthand. So it might look something that is really different that we have not seen it before, or is it going to be something very similar to the actual museum that we see physically? In your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it'll be a mixture. I think, it'll like kind of be something as simple as just having a digital display that's showing off your art. But at the same time, like, we're seeing a lot of video art that includes audio. And so you sort of need speakers. And like, I think there'll be kind of a sliding scale of like, how immersive do you, pick your flavor, how immersive do you want this thing? So yeah, I think there's just lots of work to do kind of like across the spectrum.
All right. Yeah, got it. Marguerite, like, is there any challenges that you are facing? I know you described a couple of them earlier with regards to the shards and whatnot, but do you have any other challenges that you would like to share with the audiences?
Sure. So Blockade is Neon District will be on Matic, like Devin was kind of touching on. We support in the game application both Matic and Ethereum assets, though, so you can be playing with them, and it doesn't matter if they're on Ethereum or Matic, but you will obviously need gas for Ethereum. But I guess the hang-up that I'm kind of dealing with right now is Blockade always meant to have for Neon District to be a free-to-play a game that could feel friendly enough for a mainstream user. You wouldn't have to have this onboarding friction with needing to know any blockchain, know how to interact with blockchain. We did this with Plasma Bears. It was a completely free-to-play game. So we understand, and so we had grandmas and children playing this game. You're crafting these NFTs together, taking them on adventures, and then you're leveling up this Plasma Bear. Similarly, Neon District has a similar design to that. But the problem now that I'm seeing is, one, now we're working and launching directly into our crypto user base instead of the mainstream audience like we originally had envisioned. That's okay because the wider Ethereum community is becoming more educated about NFTs, whereas before it was very niche. So that's exciting because there's, the Ethereum community is pretty large, but it is not necessarily the gamer community. So how many of these speculative users, these whales that we see who accumulate NFTs, how many of them actually play games or do it for the gaming experience, for the fun? I think the thing that makes me a little worried is that bridge that we're going to have to jump from launching off of that user base into the mainstream audience and bridging the gap in between for us to get the gaming community. Because as a blockchain gaming community, we don't really have that user base yet. So we're just building it out.
Yeah, so that comes to adoption, right? And I think there's a question from the audience here, maybe I'll open it to the floor, a question from Habib, what are the 3 things that needs to be done to have mass adoption in the NFT world? I think we talk about some of the technical hurdles and also the fact that some people are not going to NFT for the right reason, but maybe I'll just open it to the floor. Anyone can just take it. What do you think are the things that we need to do in order to increase the mass adoption outside of the community? I think you mentioned, Marguerite, about your games targeted at certain audiences, but with regards to NFT art, are we seeing more and more artists, mainstream artists who have an Instagram account or have a DeviantArt account existingly coming into the space to adopt this technology in order to sort of accrue value on their art pieces? And what would they need to do in order to ensure that they are successful in this space as well?
I'll just jump in real quick. So I'm really excited about the audio NFTs. We just saw REC sell a NFT for $26,000. And he recently pointed out how much money these artists, an artist would make, a musical artist streaming on one of these streaming applications. Something the max amount was something like $14,000 for making over 1 million plays on a song. And he just sold one NFT for $26,000. He's a pretty mainstream, or he's an indie artist, musical artist, but we're now seeing a lot of his friends and peers, and he's doing these live streams talking about NFTs and blockchain technology. You're seeing this uptick in interest. Wait, what? How are you making this money? So while it's going to be first mover advantage to that, I don't know that it will always have an audio NFT sell for $26,000. Additionally, we're seeing really great artists like Beeple, who's just last week, he made an Ethereum poster on his Instagram account. On his Twitter, he has something like 175,000 followers. And I tag teamed with OpenSea about trying to get his attention to be hey, if you're interested in Ethereum, you can do NFTs. And I know now they're having conversations over there. So seeing these big artists enter the space is going to bring a lot of other artists too. And I honestly don't think we have the manpower to catch the influx that's about to come. Right.
So mainly the big artists coming in, providing some sort of validation and inspiration to the other artists to probably come in and experiment with some of this that would probably help spur some adoption based on what you said, right? Okay, yeah, that definitely will work. John and Devin, do you have anything to add with regards to mass adoption or any advice? I think Bobby has a question here on any advice that you'd like to provide to any aspiring artists who maybe just have an Instagram account and wanted to jump onto this. Is there any reason why someone shouldn't do this, or everyone should experiment with this at least just to try and put an NFT out there and see if anyone pick it up?
Well, yeah, I definitely think everyone should get involved and start experimenting. I think, it's if you look back, when we started, everybody was experimenting. It wasn't everyone was digital art, it's going to be huge. Everyone was this is the worst idea you've ever had. You should go work on something else. And so like, I think if you're excited about art, there's no reason to not get involved. And yeah, for, mainstream adoption, I think, like I said, for us, it's like the display solution is really important. User onboarding and, wallet management. I think it's still, there's still work to do there. And then, also I think, at least in the US, like there's like still regulatory issues, like an NFT looks a lot like cryptocurrency. And so like, it's like, if you want to build something like Coinbase for NFTs, you're going to need like money transmitter laws in every state you're operating in. Mm-hmm. And that seems like, probably overly aggressive as far as like, getting set up. So I think there's still also, like regulators haven't even really looked at that, they're like looking at DeFi and things, but I think there's no clarity around like what they're going to think of NFTs. So I think that's also an important thing that's, going to come down the line.
NFTs and DeFi.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really excited for them to figure that out.
Yeah,
good luck, guys.
Yeah, it's gonna get crazy, I'm sure, when NFT takes off. Right now it's still not in their radar. So yeah. Okay, I have another question here posted by Eric. I think his question concerns about when an artist creates a digital art and posts it up on a platform. I'm not sure, like secondary market platforms like OpenSea or SuperRare or maybe Rarible or stuff like that, where there's some sort of royalty mechanism to it. I think his question is more like, does this marketplace impose some sort of a terms of service in terms of how they can commercialize the use of all this artwork? So I think like in the internet currently, there's this thing called Creative Commons, which specifies like what you can do or cannot do with a certain creative work that you upload on the internet. But in the NFT space, I'm not aware of any of such thing. I don't know if the galleries or there is a standard with regards to how someone can reuse certain creative work. Like if I buy an NFT from someone, do I really own the rights to redistribute it in whatever form I want to, or is there some nuances in there?
Yeah. So for us, I think, it's pretty explicit in the terms of service, you're not buying commercial rights. I think like if you look even like collecting art, like you're not buying commercial rights, you're buying this one thing that you get to enjoy. I think it's, in that regard, it's not really any different than sort of, you can kind of apply all the existing sort of IP infrastructure. And so it just depends, you could easily have an NFT that represented commercial rights, but that would need to be explicitly stated. Otherwise, you cannot assume that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that kind of makes sense. And I have another question here by the audience, by Jay. So I think this is sort of like an argument that has been ongoing for a while. So NFT that connects with real world assets. So obviously this is sort of a problem, right? So if you can imagine in the context of an artist paints a physical art, he sells that painting to someone and then he mints an NFT along with it and give it to the buyer, right? And now the buyer has two assets, a physical asset and a virtual asset. Now, if he then trades the virtual assets away, then what happens to the physical asset? So I think there is that disconnect between the virtual world and the physical world, and how would the trust mechanism kind of work? I think people talk about tokenizing real estate with NFT, tokenizing all kinds of physical stuff with NFT, but does it really work though in that regard? Maybe Devin, I don't know if you have any points to share on that. Yeah, are people doing this kind of sales on OpenSea, like physical items packed to an NFT, and does it really work that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess there's a variety of ways that people do this, and it's sort of this open playing field for how you want to do something like this. But the thing that we've seen happen is essentially people have custody of a particular physical asset. So let's say like a bottle of wine, right? They tokenize it and you can trade the token around. And at any point, if you want to redeem the token for the physical bottle of wine, you can burn the token or give the token back and get the physical asset, right? And that works well because it's simple. You're relying on this trusted party, right, to to have custody of the asset. But what's interesting is that you could trade around that, digital representation of the physical asset many different times before you actually take custody of the physical asset. You could also fractionalize that digital tokenized representation of the physical asset. So you can do all of these sort of DeFi type things with it, without having to like move it around, right? So that's kind of the simplest approach that we've seen people take. And of course, you could have scenarios where you take physical custody of the asset and then you send back the asset to the central party and get a token back, right? So it's not just a one way. You don't have to have it just be one way. Mm-hmm. The other kind of realm of physical versus digital sort of representations of things is we've seen this idea of a digital twin. And this is more of something for like collectible type items. So one project that was kind of interesting that did this was from the Austrian Postal Service. And they actually allowed you to purchase real stamps, right, that you could actually mail letters with if you wanted to. And those stamps came with a crypto stamp. But when you redeem the crypto stamp, the two became separated. So like, if you really wanted to, you could go and sell the physical stamp on eBay or something like that. But then you could also go and sell the crypto stamp on OpenSea, and they just sort of like diverged. And that was like, that's another way to do it, right? Is that this digital stamp has this collectible component to it, but it's not necessarily going to come with the physical representation. And that's just kind of like a different mechanic. And then of course you could get into like sort of more complex schemes where if you're trying to do peer-to-peer trading of physical assets, I think there are now sort of these different marketplaces that have like slashing mechanics, or like you basically stake some amount of token, and then if the buyer receives the asset, or if the buyer claims that they didn't receive it, they can like slash your stake or whatever it is. So we haven't seen a ton of that be experimented with, but that's sort of like the uncharted territory for like doing physical asset transfer on blockchains. But I'm not sure that that's actually like part of the NFT space, because the NFT space kind of relies on this digital asset that has this sort of predictable transfer associated with it, where it can like move around a lot without having to like worry about whether the physical representation actually moved hands. So I think those two first approaches are kind of like a good starting place for all of this.
So it kind of works best when the asset is totally digital. And if you were to do a dual model like that, if there's a divergence, they can better be existing without one or the other. And so basically works for simple use cases as you described. Okay. I think Marguerite, like you wanted to add something on that. I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So one use case for this I've heard of is like, how Nike shoes, people will buy the high-end collectible shoes and then they'll trade them around. There's a model where these shoes never leave the warehouse, right? All people are actually doing is trading the digital like token of it that represents the shoes. You could redeem for the shoes to be shipped to you at any time. So at that point, the token would be burned when it was shipped and issued. So I think that's neat for that sort of speculative market that we see across a few different physical goods. But I guess as an artist and game developer, I see the low-hanging fruit here is to work with digital assets. Like physical assets to me have a lot of like, you have district, like supply chain and all kinds of other networks you have to think about. Whereas as artists, we've never really had a way to monetize digital work in the way that we are just entering. And to me, that's the lowest hanging fruit. So as a developer, I would definitely be focusing on that experience, because there's so many creative applications just in that realm alone that until users are really, really comfortable with crypto assets, it doesn't make sense to me to try to get these mainstream users to use digital assets. I think that bridge is too big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think we're almost at the end of the segment. I'll pose maybe one last question to all of you. So obviously we have seen a uptrend for NFTs and art in the last couple of weeks. So I guess the question right now is that are we in this hype cycle that everyone is getting excited about NFTs, and is this a sustainable period of time, or are we in just a temporal euphoria? And also like moving forward, like where would the space go to like in the next like 1 to 2 years? Like, are you seeing maybe just improvements on infrastructure, or there is certain specific things that you like to see happen in the next like 1 year? I know it's very hard to predict, but for you guys who are in the space watching very closely, I'm sure you have a pretty good guess on what might happen next after this. Is it a DeFi NFT thing where insurance and stuff like that will get some traction in terms of adoption? Maybe Marguerite, you wanna go ahead, and then we can go with John and Devin after that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll give something exciting. I want to see, so I'm going to say it out loud, so someone's going to go build it. I want to see beat mixing with these audio NFTs that are coming, figuring out license ownership so you could have an application where you could take these different sound NFTs and have basically, I don't know if you've ever played with them, but there's like beat mixing games. Mm-hmm. And then you generate your own version of the mix. And then you have the ability to go sell that. That has all the like maybe child tokens associated to the original tracks that were used. Mm-hmm. And there's that, I guess, payback to the original creators as well. Mm-hmm. So I think it's possible to see that within a year.
Yeah, actually that sounds like a great idea of a token, right? Because the value can be accrued all the way down to the bits and pieces that you use to build up that music. Because I think there's a lot of issue with regards to copyright and bootlegs where the original artist do not get the royalty that he deserves. But with this, then it's sort of a good use case for NFTs, if you will. Yeah, it's a good one. John, like, do you have anything on how you see this space going? I know you described a lot about infrastructure, but anything that you hope to see happen within the next 1 to 2 years or 1 year?
I think we're just going to see a lot more kind of like mainstream artists and collectors coming into the space. I think, like I said, I think even, outside of NFTs, kind of digital art was poised to become something enormous. And I think that's still just getting started. So I think we're going to continue to see a ton of growth, and it's just going to get a lot easier to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think right now lots of people understand what NFT is. When you compare that a year ago, like nobody really care what is it about, and it's a very niche market, and we are seeing the expansion of the market going.
Absolutely.
Right. And final point from Devin, like, you have any final thoughts?
I would generally agree with what's been said. I think we'll see a gradual expansion of interest in the space. I think it's been interesting to see over the last month the wave of excitement from the DeFi community and sort of like crypto Twitter kind of getting interested in this. It feels a little bit random because this has actually been going on for quite a while, and there weren't any sort of single things that led more excitement. So I could see something sort of similar happening where, it's not a single silver bullet that brings on tons of people, but rather just a gradual kind of expansion and sort of more organic growth of the space as things keep on improving, things get easier. A lot of the problems that are in the space right now start getting solved. So yeah, that's my sort of, that's what I see happening versus one single event that, triggers the whole space, going crazy. But it's also possible that there's one breakout application that, takes it to a whole other level.
Yeah. I mean, the NFT space has come a long way somewhat. I mean, it hasn't been too far out. I think I remember when CryptoKitties took off in 2018, and there was conferences specific for NFT. There was really exciting times, and there were a lot of venture capital money pouring in, and there's a bunch of development going on. And then during the bear market, things kind of slowed down a little bit. But I think that's kind of good in terms of creating some organic growth and bringing in people into the space to continue to build the infrastructure. So yeah, I'm bullish myself as well on NFT. I'm super excited and always following it every now and then. So I think it's been a great discussion. I've been enjoying the conversation with speakers here, and I'm sure I hope the audiences learn a thing or two. And I want to say that that's all we have. And thank you everyone for coming and joining us in this meetup. And thank you our speakers, Devin, John, and Marguerite, for their expertise, bringing in their thoughts on NFT art. And yeah, so with that, we conclude this event. And thank you to all our speakers again for taking their time out to share their thoughts. And stay safe, everyone. We're living in pretty tough times. So take care. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.